My friends, in today's video, I will show you how to make this amazing bread. 4 ingredients, 3 hours, 1 delicious bread. Are you sick and tired of buying store bread and finding that there's more nutrition in the plastic than in the actual bread? Or do you simply want to learn how to make delicious homemade artisan bread without any difficulties? Well, then you've come to the right place. My friends, my name is Alvaro and this is a channel Uniquely Mary, and this is my first cooking video. It's really been requested by many of you who want me to make my homemade artisan bread. Now, one thing that I want you to point out and to pay attention to is that I'm not dressed to bake, which means this is very easy. You will not get your hands dirty. It is so simple. It takes a total of 3 hours to make, and it just requires a few ingredients. First, you're gonna need 3 cups of bread flour. You can also use all-purpose flour. I don't sift it, I don't do anything special to it. Then you're gonna need a packet of active dry yeast or instant yeast. If you use the active dry yeast, which is what I typically tend to use, you have to mix that with the hot water, foam it up, and then add it to the dry mixture. Next, you're gonna need 2 teaspoons of salt. You will also need a Dutch oven because the bread will actually bake inside of the oven. So it needs to be oven friendly. You'll need a bowl to mix, and I also like to use a spatula. That way I don't get my hands dirty at all. Finally, you're gonna need some parchment paper to help put the bread inside of the Dutch oven. Let's get started. Now, this first part is pretty simple. We're going to mix in the bowl the 3 cups of bread flour, pretty simple stuff, and then the 2 teaspoons of salt. You know, I don't even really bother to mix it much because when I'm kneading it with the spatula, everything gets mixed pretty well. Next, we're gonna get the hot water and we're gonna mix that with the active dry yeast to get it to start foam. Now, I always get a little bit more than 1.5 cups because it tends to be a little bit too dry, and you want to get hot water from the tap, not boiling, obviously, maybe with a little bit of steam because you don't want to kill the active dry yeast. And then you just pour it in, stir it up, you let it foam up a little bit. You're gonna get that yeast smell. You let it sit just for a little bit, and then pretty close to that, you pour it in. Make sure all that yeast gets in there. And then I like to keep my hands clean, so I kind of just mix it with a spatula. Just a little bit at a time. You don't want it to be too wet. I love using a spatula because you don't get your hands dirty, and it actually mixes really well and it keeps the bowl very clean. That's exactly the consistency that you want. Now, one thing that's important is you can think of this recipe as a base. You can add other spices if you want to add rosemary, if you want to add Italian herbs, or if you want to, whatever you want to do. If you want to add nuts at the end or in the middle. So this is a great base for you to make lots of different types of bread. Now we're going to let this sit for 2 hours. First, we're going to cover it and place it in a warm place in your kitchen. I will see you in 2 hours. So now we have our dough that is risen for about 2 hours. Now, one thing that's important here is you can actually let it rise for longer. You could put it in the fridge and leave it overnight for 8 hours or even more. The longer you let it rise, the more complex the flavor will be. You want your risen dough, you want your spatula, and you want your parchment paper, and we're going to use a little bit of flour just to kind of knead the dough very lightly. Now, another thing that I want to say, you want to set the oven to 450 degrees, and while it is getting hot, you want to put your Dutch oven in there to let that heat up. You want it to be hot when you put the bread inside of it because that will create the effect like a brick oven when you're making pizzas. So, and we're going to put it in there at 450 degrees on the parchment paper for 30 minutes. So let's go. We're just gonna do this really fast. And then on this granite, many of you are probably cringing because I didn't even put any flour down. But what's amazing is because you're using that spatula, you're really getting all of it off of there. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to just get a little bit of flour and I'm just gonna knead it very lightly. Now, if you notice, I'm not going to do a lot of kneading. The goal is not to knead here. Now, ideally, we would have put the flour before. So the whole goal of this is for you to see how amateur I am, which means anyone can make this bread. And when you see the results, you will be amazed. Now, one thing that you may want to do at this point, you may want to put seasonings on top. See, that's the perfect consistency. That's exactly what you're looking for. And see how it's not even sticking and you're able to use that spatula. See, that's perfect. I know that looks terrible to many of you, but what we're going to do is we're going to put this on parchment paper. Now the whole thing, I want you to pay attention to just how messy I'm being, and that is sort of intentional. This is not about being perfect. This is just about making awesome bread. Okay, so now we're going to put this into the pot that's hot, and we will bake for 30 minutes. My friends, we have 15 seconds left. This is the moment of truth. Let's see how this turned out. Now, please be careful whenever you do this. Oh my gosh, that looks so awesome. I don't know if you can see that. That looks so awesome. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna bake it in the oven for 10 more minutes to brown it. Now, what I've seen is you can bake it a little bit longer, another 15 minutes if you wanna do 20, if you want it really toasted with a really hard outer shell. But that last 10 minutes, now look at that. That is amazing. And remember how I did not do a very good job? I kind of mixed real sloppily. That's the whole idea, that this is rustic artisan bread. So 10 more minutes in the oven. Here we go. 1 more minute left. Now this bread smells amazing. It is so delicious. I cannot wait for you to see it. Oh my goodness. Do you see how wonderful that bread is? Oh gosh, it is so good. Now notice how simple this recipe is. Oh my gosh, look at. You can brush it with butter if you'd like. You can put something on top. You can dip it in olive oil. You can eat it however you want. But it is truly so delicious, so awesome, so easy.